Welcome back, sleepy souls, on Creepy Nights Show. I am your storyteller, and tonight I'm here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. So if you're brave enough, then turn off the lights, wear your headphones, and enjoy this very long bedtime story. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? But before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. I never thought much about neighbors. Growing up, my family moved around a lot, and I never had the luxury of forming those deep neighborhood friendships you see in movies. To me, neighbors were simply faces you waved at when collecting the mail, or the people you nodded at when passing by their driveway. That's why when I finally moved into my first rented home, a modest little one-story in a quiet suburban town in Ohio, I wasn't exactly searching for community. I just wanted peace, privacy, and the chance to live life on my own terms. What I got instead was something that still haunts me every single night I close my eyes. The house itself was nothing special. It was old but well kept, with white siding that needed a new coat of paint and a backyard that stretched into a row of tall, skeletal trees. The rent was affordable, maybe too affordable, but I was eager to have a place to myself, so I didn't think too hard about it. The street was calm, filled with houses that looked almost identical, like they'd been stamped out of the same suburban mold. And then there was the house next door. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it. 2 stories, shutters that hadn't been cleaned in years, a porch swing that moved slightly when the wind picked up. But there was something off. You know that feeling when you sense someone staring at you, even if you can't see them? That was the energy the place gave me. Every time I pulled into my driveway, every time I walked to the curb for my mail, I felt watched. And yet, I rarely saw anyone there. It wasn't until my second week that I met the so-called neighbor. I was unloading groceries from my car when I noticed movement on the porch. An older man, maybe in his 60s, stood there. His hair was thin, gray, and unkempt, and his clothes looked like they hadn't been changed in days. But what unsettled me most was his stare. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just looked directly at me, as though studying every movement I made. After a long, heavy pause, he gave me the smallest nod before turning and disappearing inside. I told myself not to be paranoid. Maybe he was just a lonely old man. Maybe he wasn't good with people. I tried to ignore it, but the more I lived there, the more impossible it became to dismiss. At night, I'd sometimes see a faint light flicker on in one of his upstairs windows. Not a steady light, more like the glow of a candle or an old lantern. I'd catch myself staring, trying to make out movement, but the curtains were always drawn. Occasionally, I'd hear faint noises drifting through the thin walls of our houses. A dragging sound, a low murmur, sometimes what almost sounded like a child's laughter. But as far as I knew, he lived alone. Then the incident started. Small at first. I'd come outside in the morning and find my garbage can tipped over, contents spilling across the driveway. Once my garden hose was unwound, snaking across the lawn like someone had stretched it out deliberately. Another morning I woke up to find deep scratches along the side of my car, long and jagged, like someone had dragged a key or something sharper across the paint. My mind went instantly to the neighbor, though I had no proof. I told myself maybe it was kids in the area messing around. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of his piercing stare. It got worse. One night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the unmistakable sound of footsteps in my backyard. Slow, deliberate, crunching against the damp grass. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed, straining to hear. Then came the creak of my back gate. I rushed to the window and pulled back the curtain just in time to see the shadow of a man disappearing behind the line of trees. I called the police, of course, but by the time they arrived, there was no trace of anyone. The officers gave me the usual speech, probably just a trespasser, maybe kids, keep your doors locked. But I knew better. I knew who it was. After that, sleep became impossible. Every creak of the house, every shift in the wind made me jolt awake. And then came the night that truly broke me. I was lying in bed, half awake, when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Breathing. Not outside, not through the walls. Inside my bedroom. I froze, too terrified to move. It was faint but unmistakable. A slow, ragged inhale, followed by a shaky exhale. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I turned my head toward the dark corner of the room. For a split second, I swear I saw the outline of someone standing there, tall, motionless, watching me. I lunged for the lamp, flicking it on. The corner was empty. My door was still locked. There was no one there. But the sound, the breathing, it lingered in my ears. I hardly slept at all after that, sitting upright in bed with every light on, clutching a kitchen knife like it could protect me from whatever was happening. The final straw came just 3 nights later. I had been in the living room trying to distract myself with late-night TV when I heard the faint squeak of my front door. I knew I'd locked it. Slowly, I muted the TV. The silence pressed down on me until I heard it again. The soft creak of floorboards, closer this time. Someone was inside my house. I bolted for the back door, adrenaline surging through me, but froze when I saw him. The neighbor, standing halfway down my hallway, his face partially hidden in shadow. His lips curled into a smile that made my stomach drop. I didn't wait. I ran. I don't even remember how I got to my car, how I sped down the street barefoot, hands shaking so violently I could barely keep control of the wheel. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Not that night. Maybe not ever. When the police searched the place, they found no signs of forced entry. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But here's the part that chills me more than anything. When they checked the neighbor's house, they discovered it had been abandoned for years. Boarded up from the inside. Empty. Dust-covered furniture. Rotting floorboards. Not a single sign of life. The man I'd been seeing, the man who'd stood in my hallway, he wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, I can still feel his stare every time I close my eyes. Who was the man? If the house was abandoned, how could he have been living there? And if he wasn't alive, then what exactly had been standing in my hallway that night? When I left that house after the hallway incident, I swore I would never set foot near it again. But promises you make in the rush of fear rarely survive the erosion of time. Weeks passed, and while the memory of that night never fully faded, life has a way of dulling even the sharpest terror. I convinced myself that maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe my mind had filled in blanks with fear, and maybe the reports of the abandoned house next door had been exaggerated or mistaken. After all, how often do police reports and property records line up perfectly with what you see with your own eyes? There had to be some explanation, right? Still, I moved into a temporary apartment across town. A small place with creaky floors and water-stained ceilings, but at least it was mine and at least it was away from him. Yet even in the new apartment, my nights weren't quiet. Sleep didn't come easy. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced I heard footsteps outside my door, or soft breathing behind me when I turned the lights off. My therapist told me it was trauma-induced paranoia. My friends told me I needed to drink less coffee, get more rest, stop obsessing over what had happened, and I almost believed them, until one evening, something pulled me back toward that old street. It started innocently. I was driving home after work, and without even realizing it, I had taken a wrong turn. My GPS rerouted me, and before I knew it, I was heading down familiar streets lined with cookie-cutter houses. I slowed the car as I recognized the curve, the crooked mailbox, the overgrown hedges. There it was, my old rental, sitting like a pale, silent memory. And beside it, the neighbor's house. I don't know what I expected to see. Boarded windows, a sagging porch, a lifeless, rotting structure. And for the most part, that's what it was. But then I saw her. A woman. Standing in the upstairs window, her pale face pressed almost too close against the glass. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her expression unreadable. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even seem to breathe. She just watched. And for the briefest second I could have sworn I recognized her. Not because I'd seen her before, but because she looked wrong. like an echo of someone I should have known. My stomach turned cold, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, the window was empty. I told myself I was hallucinating, that it was the result of too many sleepless nights. But deep down, I knew I hadn't imagined her. Something inside that house had wanted me to see her, to know she was there. And like an idiot, instead of driving away, I parked. I don't know if it was morbid curiosity or some twisted sense of closure I thought I needed, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know. The air outside was heavy, the kind that clings to your skin and makes you feel like you're being watched even when no one is around. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I walked slowly toward the house, each step echoing louder than it should have. The porch creaked under my weight, and when I reached for the doorknob, I expected it to be locked. It wasn't. The door swung open with a groan, as though it had been waiting for me. The smell hit me first, damp wood, mildew, and something sour that made my stomach churn. The air inside was thick, stale, carrying the weight of years without ventilation. Dust motes swirled in the dim light filtering through torn curtains. The furniture was still there, a sagging couch, a broken coffee table, a rocking chair tilted slightly to one side. But everything was coated in grime, as though no one had touched a single thing in decades. And yet, there were signs of life. A mug sat on the table, its surface stained with something dark. The rocking chair swayed faintly, though no one was near it. And from upstairs, I heard it, the creak of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. I froze. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body disobeyed. Instead, I found myself climbing the staircase, one shaky step at a time, the wood groaning beneath my weight. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer, until I reached the landing. The hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors. The second one on the left was where the sound came from. With trembling hands, I pushed it open. The room was small, suffocatingly so. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, the floorboards warped with water damage. And in the corner by the window stood the rocking chair. It was moving back and forth, slow and steady, though no one sat in it. My gaze lifted, heart hammering in my chest, and that's when I saw her again. The woman. The same pale face I'd seen from the street. Only now, she was closer. Much closer. Her skin was paper white, stretched too tightly across her skull, her lips cracked and colorless. Her eyes. God, her eyes were black pits, endless and hollow, pulling at me as though they wanted to swallow me whole. I stumbled backward, crashing into the door frame, but she didn't move. She just stared, unblinking, her mouth slowly curving into something that might have been a smile, or maybe just the cruel mimicry of one. And then, without warning, she vanished. Not in a blur, not in a puff of smoke. One moment she was there, the next she wasn't. The chair kept rocking, as if mocking me. I ran. I didn't care how loud I was or if the floor collapsed beneath me. I tore down the stairs, through the living room, and out the front door. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and I didn't stop until I was safely locked inside my car, gasping for air. I should have driven away, left that cursed house in my rearview mirror forever. But before I could, movement caught my eye. In the upstairs window, she was there again. Only this time she wasn't alone. Standing behind her, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder, was the neighbor. The same man I'd seen in my hallway weeks ago. His eyes locked onto mine, and his mouth formed words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. Welcome back. If the police had said the house was abandoned, if I had seen it rotting and lifeless inside, then how could they both be there, watching me, waiting for me? And why did I feel like I had just stepped into something that had been planned all along? After that night, I didn't sleep properly for weeks. The image of that pale woman with those hollow eyes and the neighbor standing behind her like some dark shadow was etched into my brain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them staring at me through that upstairs window. And the worst part? The look on their faces wasn't threatening in the way you'd expect. It wasn't wild or monstrous. It was calm, patient, almost welcoming. Like they were expecting me. Like they knew I would come back eventually. That feeling gnawed at me far more than outright terror ever could. I tried to push it out of my mind. I really did. I buried myself in work, in routine, in pretending that life was normal. But the pull of that house was stronger than I realized. It's like once you've been inside, it doesn't let you go. Even in my new apartment, I began hearing noises at night again. Those slow, deliberate footsteps above me when I lived on the top floor, or the faint creak of my closet door shifting open when I swore I had closed it tightly. I would wake up to the sound of whispering, so faint I couldn't make out the words, but unmistakably real. And sometimes, in the reflection of my TV screen or my bathroom mirror, I would catch the faint outline of someone standing just behind me. When I turned, of course, there was never anyone there. Then came the dreams. Night after night, I dreamt I was back inside the neighbor's house. In the dream, I was always standing at the top of the stairs, staring down into the darkness of the basement. Something waited for me down there. Something that wanted me to open the door. But no matter how hard I tried, my legs wouldn't move. I would wake in a cold sweat, heart hammering, feeling like I had escaped some terrible fate by sheer chance. But the dream returned again and again, each time more vivid, more insistent, until I started to wonder if it wasn't a dream at all, but an invitation. One evening, I made a mistake. A stupid, reckless mistake that I still can't fully explain. Maybe it was the insomnia, maybe it was the way the dreams were eating at my sanity, or maybe it was the simple fact that I couldn't resist the pull anymore. But I found myself back on that street, parked in the same spot, staring at that cursed house. The curtains upstairs were drawn, but I didn't need to see them. I knew they were watching, waiting. I told myself I wouldn't go inside this time. I would just sit there, look at the house, and prove to myself that it had no power over me. But even as I thought it, my body betrayed me. My hand reached for the door handle, my feet carried me across the overgrown lawn, and before I knew it, I was standing on the porch again, staring at that door. It opened just as easily as it had before. The house greeted me with the same stench of rot and mildew, the same oppressive silence that pressed against my ears like a weight. I didn't want to go upstairs again. I couldn't. Every nerve in my body screamed against it. Instead, my eyes were drawn to something I hadn't noticed before. A door at the far end of the kitchen. Smaller, narrower than the others. A door that seemed almost out of place, as though it had been hidden deliberately. My chest tightened as I realized what it must lead to. The basement. The same basement that haunted my dreams. I stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at that door, trying to summon the will to turn around and leave. But just like in my dreams, I felt pulled toward it, step by step, until my hand was on the knob. The metal was icy cold, burning against my palm as though it resented being touched. Slowly I twisted. The door creaked open, and a gust of stale, cold air rushed out, carrying with it a smell so foul it made me gag. Something between damp earth and decayed flesh. The stairs were steep, the wood warped and darkened with age. They descended into a blackness so complete it felt alive. I reached for my phone to use its flashlight, but the screen flickered and went dead the moment I aimed it downward. My battery had been full. I swallowed hard, my breath quickening, and for a moment I considered bolting. But then I heard it. The faint sound of movement below. A dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across the floor, and beneath it a whisper. Low, rhythmic like chanting. I don't know why I kept going. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was the same force that had drawn me back here in the first place. I stepped onto the first stair, and it groaned under my weight. Then the second. My hand clutched the railing, slick with grime, as I descended into the suffocating darkness. Halfway down, I froze. From the shadows below, two pinpricks of light appeared. Not lights exactly. Eyes. Reflective, watching me from the bottom of the staircase. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. And then, slowly, they began to rise, as though whoever they belonged to was standing up. My breath caught in my throat and instinct screamed at me to turn back. But before I could, the air filled with a voice. Low, raspy, familiar. "You've come back just like we knew you would." The sound paralyzed me. My legs felt like lead, my chest locked tight as I realized who the voice belonged to. The neighbor. The same man who wasn't supposed to exist, who had been standing in my hallway weeks ago, who had appeared behind that pale woman in the window. He was here, below me, waiting. I stumbled back up the stairs, tripping over my own feet in my panic. The door at the top slammed shut before I could reach it, plunging me into absolute darkness. I pounded on it, screaming, but it wouldn't budge. And then I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, crawling, slow, deliberate, scraping hands pulling across the wood of the stairs. Closer, closer. I spun, pressing myself against the door, and for a split second, I saw her again. The woman. She was halfway up the staircase, her pale hands gripping the steps, her hollow eyes locked on mine. But this time, she spoke. Her voice was little more than a hiss, but the words were clear. "He's not your neighbor. He never was." And then the eyes vanished. The sound of crawling ceased. The air grew still. When I turned back, the door was open, swinging gently, as though it had never been locked. I bolted through it, out of the house, and didn't stop running until my lungs gave out. But her words followed me, echoing in my head. If he wasn't my neighbor, then who or what was he? And if he never was my neighbor, then why had everyone in the street acted like the house was perfectly normal? Why had no one warned me? Unless, of course, they knew something I didn't. After the basement, I tried to convince myself I was done. I told myself no one in their right mind would ever set foot near that house again. Not after what I had seen, not after the way the woman had looked at me from the stairs and whispered those words. But being done isn't a choice you get to make with that place. The house doesn't let go of you. It clings to you like a sickness, a weight you carry even when you move miles away. The days afterward were strange. At first, I thought I was just tired, sleep-deprived, or maybe losing my grip on reality. But the world around me began to change in subtle ways. Walking down the street, I noticed how empty everything seemed. Neighbors who used to wave now avoided eye contact. People who used to mow their lawns, wash their cars, or walk their dogs were nowhere to be seen. The entire street, once filled with the quiet hum of suburban life, felt abandoned. Silent. I tested it one morning. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, past my old rental, past the neighbor's house, past the rows of near-identical homes. Every window was closed, every curtain drawn. No kids on bikes, no mail trucks, not even the faint barking of a dog. It was like the entire block had been swallowed by something invisible, something that drained the life out of it while leaving the shells of the houses behind. And yet, I felt eyes on me the whole time. Not just from the neighbor's house, but from every house. As if behind each drawn curtain something waited, something that wasn't human anymore. The strangest part was the way people reacted when I talked about it outside the neighborhood. Friends, coworkers, even the police. They all looked at me with pity, the kind of look you give someone you think is unraveling. They told me the street was perfectly normal, that people lived there, families with children, retirees, couples with dogs. When I insisted otherwise, they brushed it off, said I must have gone at the wrong time, maybe early morning when people were at work. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. And I knew I wasn't imagining it. One evening, against every instinct screaming inside me, I went back. Not inside the house this time, just to the street. I parked my car at the far end and walked. Slowly. Each step echoed on the pavement far too loud in the unnatural silence. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against my skin like humidity, but colder, sharper, almost metallic. I passed house after house, each one darker than the last. Curtains twitched occasionally, just enough to let me know something was behind them, watching. When I reached the neighbor's house, I stopped. It looked the same as always, boarded, rotting, but somehow waiting. My eyes drifted upward, to the second-story window where I had first seen the pale woman. The glass was dark, but as I stared, the faint outline of her face began to emerge. First the eyes, those hollow, endless pits. Then the pale skin, stretched thin, and finally the cracked lips curving into that unnatural smile. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there, framed by the darkness, as if she had been waiting for me all along. I tore my gaze away, heart pounding, and that's when I noticed something even more terrifying. Across the street, in the window of another house, another face appeared. Not hers, someone else. A man this time, gaunt and lifeless, his eyes equally hollow, his skin hanging loosely from his bones. He stared at me with the same expression, then another, and another. One by one, faces began appearing in the windows of the other houses. Men, women, even children. All of them pale, all of them silent, all of them watching me with those hollow, endless eyes. It was as if the entire neighborhood had emptied itself of real people and been refilled with whatever they were. My chest tightened, panic clawing at me as I stumbled backward. Every curtain twitched, every window filled. Dozens of faces, maybe more, all staring at me in perfect silence. The only sound was the faint creaking of the porch swing at the neighbor's house, moving on its own in the still air. I turned to run, but something stopped me cold. A voice. Not loud, not booming, but soft and collective, like dozens of whispers blending into one. They weren't speaking to each other. They were speaking to me. You don't belong here. Not yet. The words froze me to the spot. My pulse thundered in my ears, sweat dripping down my back as I tried to comprehend what they meant. Not yet. As if one day, I would belong. I don't remember how I made it back to my car. My memory is a blur of running feet, frantic breaths, the heavy sense of dozens of eyes boring into me from every direction. But when I slammed the door shut and locked it, gasping for air, the neighborhood was silent again. The windows empty. The faces gone. I drove until the gas tank was nearly empty, until I found myself miles away, parked in a grocery store lot with trembling hands. And as I sat there, trying to convince myself I wasn't insane, my phone buzzed. A notification. A text. The number was unknown. The message was short. You came back to the street. Next time you won't leave. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my mind racing, my throat dry. I should have blocked the number, thrown the phone away, done something. But instead I sat there frozen because deep down I already knew the truth. The message wasn't a threat. It was a promise. If the entire street wasn't filled with neighbors at all, but with them, then what exactly had I been living next to all that time? And worse, why did they say I would belong to them one day? I don't think I've slept more than a couple of hours since that night. Every creak, every shift of the old wooden beams above me feels like a message from the house, as if the walls themselves are whispering reminders of the things I'd rather forget. My friends have stopped checking in on me because they think I'm overreacting, but I can't even tell them the truth without sounding insane. I've tried to write it down, hoping the weight of it would feel lighter on paper. But every sentence I start only makes the memory sharper, heavier. Still, maybe telling it in full is the only way I can make sense of it. That night, after hearing the scraping inside my neighbor's attic, I didn't dare move. I sat on my couch with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something else to happen. Hours passed. The scraping would stop, then return, sometimes faint, sometimes loud, always inconsistent, like it was testing me, like it wanted to know if I was still awake. When dawn finally crept in through the blinds, painting the room in pale, lifeless light, I finally felt some relief. But the relief lasted only seconds, because in that morning silence I heard something drop in the hallway outside my apartment door. At first I thought it might be the usual morning shuffle of one of my neighbors heading out for work. But when I pressed my ear against the door, I realized the sound wasn't footsteps. It was a slow dragging, a dull thump followed by a scrape, like something heavy being pulled across the hall. I didn't open the door. Not then. I was too afraid. But when I peeked through the peephole, I saw nothing. No one. Just an empty, quiet hallway. Still, the sound continued, as if it was right outside, yet invisible to my eyes. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't. My body was on edge, my mind unraveling. I tried to distract myself with television, but no sound drowned out the memory of that dragging noise. By the time night fell, I felt like I'd been awake for days. The house across the street, the neighbor's house, was still dark, still empty, but I couldn't stop watching it. It was like it held me in place, a magnet for my attention. And then, right around midnight, I saw a movement in one of the upstairs windows. It was just a shadow at first, pacing slowly back and forth across the frame, never fully stepping into the light. But then it stopped, and I swear on my life, it turned toward me. I couldn't see a face, not really, but there was a weight in the way it stared. A recognition. My breath caught in my throat and I pulled the curtains closed so quickly that I nearly ripped them from the rod. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But in my heart I knew I hadn't imagined it. The real terror came when I woke up hours later to the sound of someone whispering my name. Not from outside, from inside my apartment. The voice was so low, so soft, but unmistakable. It came from the corner of my bedroom where the darkness was thickest. My first instinct was to turn on the lamp beside me, but the second my hand brushed the switch, the whisper stopped. The room was dead silent, almost too silent. My ears rang with it, and when the light filled the room, the corner was empty, just shadows thrown by the chair and my stack of laundry, nothing else. I didn't sleep again that night, or the next. I started keeping a knife in my hand whenever I walked from room to room, too paranoid to even take the trash out. Then, on the third night, it happened again. The voice. Only this time, it wasn't whispering my name. It was repeating something over and over. At first, I couldn't make out the words. It was too fast, too garbled. But when I strained, holding my breath to listen, I realized it was saying, "Don't look outside, don't look outside, don't look outside." The repetition was maddening, circling in my head like a song you can't shake off. I thought maybe if I obeyed, if I didn't peek out the window, it would stop. But curiosity, fear, some twisted instinct, it got the better of me. I parted the curtain just slightly, just enough to see the street below. And there, standing directly across the road under the street lamp, was the figure from the neighbor's house. Not a shadow this time, not vague. It was tall, impossibly thin, its skin pale as chalk, almost glowing in the light. It had no hair, no expression, no real face at all, just smooth, blank flesh where features should have been. Yet somehow, I knew it was smiling at me. My stomach turned, and I let the curtain fall, stumbling back onto the floor. The whisper in my bedroom stopped. Silence again. Too much silence. I don't remember much after that. I must have blacked out from exhaustion or fear because when I opened my eyes again, it was daylight. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from my boss, from my family. But what terrified me more than anything else was the voicemail notification. I don't give my number to anyone in this neighborhood. No one should have been calling me at that hour. But when I played the message, there was no voice, just a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. And then, in the last few seconds of the recording, I heard it. My own voice whispering, "Don't look outside." That was last night. I don't know if I can survive another one. My neighbors. They aren't my neighbors anymore. Or maybe they never were. And whatever's in that house, it knows me. It's inside my walls, my phone, my thoughts. The worst part? I can feel it moving closer. The neighbors seem to know the narrator personally, and their presence is breaking into his life through whispers, windows, and even his phone. But in part 6, he'll discover that they may not just be watching him. They might have been living with him all along. I used to believe the boundary of my fear ended at my front door. That if I locked it, if I drew the curtains and turned on every light, I could keep the darkness at bay. But what's happening now doesn't respect doors or locks or curtains. The thing that haunts me doesn't knock before entering. It slips through the cracks, settles into the corners, and waits. I used to think I was safe inside my apartment. Now, I'm not even safe inside myself. The day after that voicemail, I decided I couldn't stay here any longer. I paced the apartment with a packed bag, muttering to myself that I'd leave for a hotel, maybe even drive out of town altogether. But each time I reached for the doorknob, something stopped me. Not physically. I wasn't restrained, but it felt like a weight pressed against my chest, a suffocating heaviness that made it impossible to step outside. The idea of leaving the apartment filled me with more dread than staying. It was like the walls were holding me hostage, whispering without sound, "You belong here now." By noon, exhaustion took over, and I collapsed onto the couch. I must have drifted off because I woke to the sound of breathing, heavy, uneven breathing, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I told myself it was my imagination, but then came the unmistakable sound of bare feet shuffling across the floorboards. My heart slammed against my ribs. Slowly, I turned my head toward the bedroom door, praying I wouldn't see what I thought I'd see. The door was cracked open, just a sliver, enough for me to see something pale standing in the darkness. Not a full figure, just a shape, tall, thin, motionless, watching. My mouth went dry, and I didn't move a muscle. For what felt like hours, it stood there, not entering, not retreating, just waiting, like it knew time itself was its weapon. And then, as quietly as it appeared, it slipped away into the blackness of the hall. I wanted to convince myself it was a dream. But when I finally worked up the courage to check the hallway, the floor was damp, as though something wet had walked across it. And there, smeared across the wood, were faint footprints leading not toward the front door, but toward the attic access hatch above the hall closet. My neighbor's attic. Somehow, it connected to mine. That realization hollowed me out. It meant there was no true separation between us. Whatever had been scraping above their house, whatever had been pacing in their window, could cross over into my home at any time it wanted. The thought made my head spin. I wanted answers, but every instinct screamed that I wasn't ready to know. Still, curiosity clawed harder than fear. That night, I brought the ladder out from storage and positioned it beneath the attic hatch. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. The ladder creaked as I climbed, each step groaning under my weight. When I finally pushed the hatch open, a rush of stale, suffocating air spilled down over me. It smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic like rust or blood. I forced the beam of the flashlight into the void, half expecting to see nothing but insulation and dust. What I saw instead made my stomach lurch. The attic wasn't empty. Against the far wall were stacks of old photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were scattered in piles, tacked to the wooden beams, even taped to the insulation. Faces stared back at me from every direction. My face, taken from different angles, through windows, across the street, even inside my apartment. Some were recent. I recognized the shirt I had worn just days ago. Others were from months back, moments I didn't even remember living. I scrambled back down the ladder, nearly falling in my haste. My chest heaved as I backed into the living room, staring up at the hatch like it was a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. questions colliding and dissolving into each other. Who took those pictures? How long had they been watching me? And why did I feel, deep down, that I already knew the answer? The rest of the night is a blur. I drank, I paced, I cried. At some point I must have blacked out on the couch because I woke up again in darkness. Not the soft, natural darkness of night, but something heavier, suffocating. The air was ice cold, my breath visible in the faint glow from the street lamp outside. And then I realized something that turned my blood to ice. I wasn't on the couch anymore. I was lying on the floor of the attic. My flashlight was gone. The photographs surrounded me, hundreds of versions of myself staring down in the pale light that leaked through the cracks. My pulse roared in my ears as I pushed myself up, scanning the shadows for movement. That's when I heard it. A slow, deliberate inhale, followed by a rattling exhale. Not behind me, not in front, above me. I tilted my head back, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. It clung to the beams overhead like an insect, its limbs impossibly long, its pale skin stretched tight over its bones. Its face, or what should have been a face, was smooth, featureless, yet somehow expressive. The surface rippled as though something beneath it was trying to push its way out. It lowered its head toward me, and though it had no eyes, I felt its gaze drill into me. I couldn't move. My body locked, frozen between fight and flight. The creature tilted its head in a way that almost seemed curious, then raised one long, skeletal hand and pressed it against its blank face. The skin shifted, writhing until shapes began to form. 2 hollows for eyes, a curve for a mouth, my eyes, my face. The photographs weren't just surveillance, they were blueprints. It was wearing me. The entity has been collecting the narrator's image, voice, and life itself, not just watching but preparing to become him. In the final part, the horrifying truth of the neighbors and their purpose will be revealed. I don't know how long I stayed frozen beneath that thing in the attic. Seconds, minutes, maybe hours. It all collapsed into a single unbearable moment. My body screamed to move, to fight, to flee, but my limbs wouldn't obey. It wasn't fear anymore. It was control. The creature wasn't just watching me, it was inside me, wrapping itself around my nerves like invisible chains. I knew then that running wouldn't matter. No matter where I went, I was already its possession. The blank skin of its face finished reshaping into something horrifyingly familiar. My own reflection, only warped, stretched, wrong. Like a mask carved from candle wax, melted and frozen mid-drip. I wanted to scream, but when I opened my mouth, I heard my own voice echo back, coming not from me but from it. Perfectly mimicked, perfectly practiced. Don't look outside. The words hit me like a hammer, because they weren't just the whispers I'd heard in my bedroom. They were the words from the voicemail, the words I thought had come from my own mouth. Now I understood. It hadn't been a recording. It had been the creature itself, already rehearsing my voice, perfecting the imitation. I stumbled backward, tripping over piles of photographs, and fell hard onto the attic floor. Some of the pictures scattered around me, and for the first time, I noticed something different. Not all the photos were of me. Some were of other people, neighbors I vaguely recognized, people who had lived in this neighborhood before me, faces I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. One face stood out among them, a young man with dark hair and tired eyes. I recognized him instantly, though I hadn't thought of him in years. He used to live 2 doors down. Everyone whispered about how he'd gone missing one night, left without a trace. But here he was, staring at me from a photograph pinned to the rafters. Beneath it, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was one single word: mine. A sickening realization hit me. The neighbors who disappeared, the tenants who left suddenly, the people who faded into rumor and memory, they hadn't left at all. They'd been replaced, one by one, consumed and imitated by the thing that lived between the houses. The neighbors weren't people anymore. They were hollowed-out shells, copies, masks worn by this thing to walk freely in the world. And now, it was my turn. The attic air thickened, pressing against my lungs like smoke. The creature began to crawl down from the rafters, impossibly slow, savoring every movement. Its limbs bent at grotesque angles as it descended, the face it had stolen from me twisting into a smile. I scrambled backward toward the ladder, but before I could reach it, I felt a hand clamp around my ankle. Not a physical hand. Something colder. Something inside my mind, locking me in place. My vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I'd black out. But then, something strange happened. The attic wasn't dark anymore. It was bright, flooded with sunlight streaming through windows that didn't exist. The photographs on the walls dissolved, and in their place, I saw myself. Dozens of versions of me walking through my apartment, sitting at my desk, lying in my bed. Each one of them looked normal, alive, unaware of the thing looming over them. My body split into fragments, possibilities scattered like broken glass. And in every fragment I could see it. The creature behind me, wearing my skin. The vision snapped, and I was back in the attic. My chest heaved as I realized what it was showing me. This wasn't just about replacing me in the eyes of my neighbors. This was about erasing me entirely, slipping into my life so seamlessly that no one would even know I'd gone. My family would still get phone calls from me. My boss would still receive emails from me. My friends would still laugh at jokes sent by me. And all the while, my body, my soul, whatever makes me me, would be locked away in some attic corner, just another forgotten photograph in its collection. That thought broke something in me. I couldn't let it win. Not silently, not easily. Summoning every ounce of strength left in me, I lunged toward the ladder. The grip on my ankle tightened, yanking me back so hard I thought my bones would snap. But adrenaline surged, and with a scream that barely sounded human, I kicked until the pressure released. I scrambled down the ladder so fast I nearly fell, hitting the floor with a thud that rattled my teeth. I didn't stop to breathe. I ran. Out of the hallway, through the living room, straight to the front door. My hands fumbled at the lock, sweat and blood mixing on my palms, and just as I threw the door open, I heard it behind me. My voice, perfect and calm, calling out from the attic. "Where are you going?" The sound froze me in place. For a fraction of a second I looked back, and in that sliver of hesitation, I saw myself stepping out of the attic hatch. Not the creature. Me. Same face, same clothes, same frantic eyes. It smiled, tilting its head in a way I never would. And that's when the final truth hit me. It didn't need to replace me tomorrow. It already had. I stumbled into the street, gasping for air, only to realize the neighborhood was alive with activity. Lights flicked on in houses I hadn't seen lit in weeks. Doors opened. People stepped out. My neighbors. All of them standing silently on their porches, all of them watching me. Their faces were too still, too perfect, their smiles too wide. Every single one of them looked exactly like the photographs I'd seen in the attic. Hollow replicas of people who no longer existed. I turned back to my apartment just in time to see the other me step onto the porch, calm and collected, waving to the neighbors like we were all old friends. He looked at me and grinned with my teeth, my lips, my eyes. And the neighbors grinned back. No one said a word. I ran. I don't remember how far. Maybe miles. Maybe just blocks. But I ran until my lungs felt like fire and my legs gave out beneath me. I collapsed on a patch of cold grass, staring at the sky, whispering to myself that I had escaped. That I was still me. That I was still real. But deep down, I know the truth. The neighbors will never come looking for me because they already have their version of me. The world will keep spinning with that thing in my place, wearing my life like a second skin. And I'll fade, just like the others. A story no one remembers. A face in a photograph tacked to the rafters of an attic no one dares enter. The neighbors aren't human. They never were. And now, neither am I. The neighbors are not people at all, but perfect replacements created by the attic-dwelling entity that wears identities like masks. The narrator becomes one of its victims, erased and replaced, his life continuing without him.